The Wall Street Journal has done a report that a teacher in South Korea is making $4 million a year. Now that would make you think that they put a different emphasis on education than we do here in the United States. Ki-hoon has been teaching for over 20 years, and he does these private after-school tutoring programs, and he is paid accordingly because he does a really good job. Let's take a look at some facts about education. This is South Korea versus the United States. High school graduation rate in the US, 77%, South Korea, 93%. Eighth graders ranked advanced. It's 7% in the US, 47% in South Korea. And in 2012, the US spent $15 billion on video games. South Korea spent $17 billion on tutoring services. All right, I mean, it's hard to argue with numbers like that. So there's a lot of ways we can go here. But first off, do we just not put the right emphasis on education in any way whatsoever?
Yeah, I think education is definitely like ripe for disruption, and it makes me really happy to hear that an educator is being appreciated, in that way in South Korea. But on the other hand, the fact that there are so many problems with education here in the U.S. has given rise to really innovative startups like Khan Academy and the amazing things that they're doing in education, or a platform for a guy like Ken Robinson to have the most viewed TED Talk of all time, and his thoughts on how education needs to be like disrupted. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of exciting things going on in this country, but yes, to answer your question is basically.
Do you think it's ever possible that we will pay our educators like this guy? I mean, this guy's basically being paid like a basketball player or a professional athlete.
I mean, I think I think it's really cool, but I think it does open up to kind of a devil's advocate discussion too, which is about, this guy gets paid really well because he does private after-school tutoring, and only rich people are able to buy seats in his lecture halls. Yeah. Only rich people are able to buy individual downloads of his lectures. So I think that this model, although yes, I would love to see teachers actually getting bonuses and teachers being paid more for doing a good job and not just like a static salary where all teachers' performance is put into one pot and it doesn't really kind of entice teachers to do a better job. Because let's be real, that is the one variable in the classroom that actually matters. Across almost everything else, having a really solid, good teacher who's invested and who cares is going to have the biggest impact on the education of the students. Yeah. But at the same time, a model like this could potentially just increase the rift between the upper and the lower classes in this country, and we already have a huge middle class problem here.
Right. So I could see this going either way. It's a good point. Like, either the rich people are just going to keep being able to pay better teachers, or because everything, the more it goes online and the more people that get involved, it's sort of like healthcare, that the hope is you get more people in on it and there's more resources, and then it ultimately gets cheaper. But I guess
there's more competition there, that people, this individual made news because he is the most sought after teacher in South Korea. That's why he's making $4 million. But these are highly competitive tutoring programs, and so there are a lot of people vying for those spots. There are a lot of people vying to make that much money. So the hope would be that even individuals who maybe aren't as successful as this individual teacher are able to pull in, a specific amount of money, and poorer individuals might be able to put their students into those after-school programs. But it really looks like it's an issue of priorities, that parents are prioritizing different in that country. They're willing to put money into their children's education over putting money into, maybe whatever we're wasting our money on here.
Right.
Video games.
Video games. But is there any, I'm a big video game guy. I used to work at electronics boutique. I don't want to brag. I was an assistant manager, But is there any risk in an overemphasis? I don't want to just focus on that. Like, is there any risk in an overemphasis on education, and that maybe we are getting something here in the United States because our kids do play a lot and play video games and blah, blah, blah.
But do our kids play a lot anymore?
What are they? I don't know what the kids are doing these days.
They're Instagram a lot.
They're Instagramming a lot.
But they're not, I mean, recess is getting cut. A lot of kids aren't, parents are too scared to let their kids play outside. We have like a massive childhood obesity epidemic in this country. Yeah, obviously, I think that we need to have a well-rounded approach to education, and I think there's obviously a risk of being too kind of totalitarian with the way that you raise your children and forcing education on them to an extent that you don't get enough hours of sleep at night, or that you don't get to exercise.
So if we found out that the South Koreans were much smarter than us and even more productive, but at the end of the day we're not as happy because we don't, I'm just playing devil's advocate here for a second, but not as happy because we do play, whether it's outside or just sitting on PlayStation, do you think it's a worth trade-off? It's a worthy trade-off? The
I don't know.
happiness versus
Happiness.
intelligence.
No, I think intelligence is definitely, or it's not even intelligence per se, because there's no way to even standardize, like one sort of overarching intelligence quotient, obviously. But we should do our best to provoke imagination amongst children and sort of creative output, and Malcolm Gladwell calls it concerted cultivation, putting kids in as many sort of creative and novel environments as possible. I think putting too much emphasis on STEM education could be problematic, and that's sort of like Ken Robinson's whole thing, is that we should be doing more to get children to think creatively. And
I don't see there being a conflict between thinking creatively and having an emphasis on STEM education. I think we should be changing the way that we approach STEM education so that creative thought is a part of STEM education.
Do you think they're exactly equal? Do you think that we should be teaching them completely equally, like sort of the facts and then how to use the creative part of your brain?
I think that doing science is ultimately using the creative part of your brain. You cannot be a successful scientist without being a very creative, out-of-the-box thinker.
That's
and
true.
I think,
but a lot of people draw the analogy that science is math, and so you have to be great at math to be good at science. Like it's a very sort of.
But even math
archaic.
is a creative endeavor. I think that if we start students understanding math theory and not just memorizing times tables, I think that there's a better approach there too.
Right.
But that's a totally different
That's
issue.
a totally different topic. But well, it reminds me of how Albert Einstein, who our greatest scientist ever, couldn't tie his shoes. Like he
was
could.
also like probably highly autistic.
Probably. But the fact that he had trouble doing sort of daily simple tasks because his brain was operating in a whole other realm that few of us ever get to.
Yeah.
Although if you smoke some of that pot that we talked about earlier in the show, I guess there's a chance.